Right, let's kick off this year with 3 comics from my Discord community. I'm going to look through all 3 of them and point out things that would have helped me when I was making comics, and hopefully it'll help you too. And if you want your comic featured in a future video, then join the Discord, which you can find in my channel page. Right, let's get to the first one. All right, so the first comic we've got is Lintosphere by Cycle of George. So the first thing I want to talk about is font, specifically readability when it comes to font, because although this is a fancy font and it looks quite cool, it's quite difficult to read for some people. So I'm not saying don't use this, but I'm saying that if you do use a fancy font like this, then you might want to reconsider it, just because it's not always the easiest thing to read. However, the main thing, in fact, actually, if I go back to this first page again, so we start off with this voiceover, or this character here, this hooded character here is talking, right? Because the balloon tail went towards her. And then we've got this character talking as well. Now, I assume that this character is the same as that first hooded character, but the font has changed. So that's another thing. In fact, that's the main reason why I wanted to draw attention to this. Ideally, you want to keep your fonts consistent, because then if we go to the next page, and then the next page after that, we've got another font as well, which is hand lettered, it looks like. So broadly speaking, you want your fonts to be the same font type and also the same size, because I've noticed that some of the fonts, if I go back to that first page again, it looks like that this font here is a different size to this font here. So generally speaking, you want to try and have consistency with your fonts. It just makes it a lot easier to read. So that's the first point. The second thing that I wanted to talk about with this comic in particular was, well, actually, before I do that, just a little note. I really like this gap here. I know it sounds weird, but I really like it, because usually what you can do within comics, within the page itself, is if you expand the gaps between the panels, that can kind of give you an indication of time passing. And although you already do that with this, because you can clearly see this is night and clearly see that this is the daytime. And so you can kind of tell that some time has passed, because we've gone from day to night. So that we see time passing. But the addition of this gap here just gives that even more space and time. And I thought that was quite a nice touch. So I just wanted to point that out. Now, it's this scene that I want to focus on for this critique, because basically we've got our hero here, who is Lint, and he is being called by these 2 girls here because they're being attacked by a thorn tiger. Now, the scene plays out and everything's fine. It's all good until we get to this page here. And it's this page that I really struggled with, and I had to reread it a few times before I really figured out what was going on. And I'm going to bring this into Clip Studio Paint so I can talk about it. So, the way this scene plays out is we've got the thorn tiger is going towards our hero, who is there. Our hero takes something out of their pocket. The tiger lunges, and then it lands. And then the 2 girls cheer him on, and then the tiger looks, I think, confused or puzzled, or we don't know what's going on, and the hero is no longer there. The reason I had trouble with this is because I did not understand what this panel was about here. That's an amazing square, holy Moses. This panel here, I did not get it. I didn't understand what was going on, because I didn't know that that had any significance whatsoever. That looks just like a puddle on the floor, looks like maybe a little bit of swamp or something like that. But I didn't know, I just didn't understand it. And I didn't understand why he took this out of his pocket either. So one of the things that you need to be aware of when you're creating like a particularly a fantastical kind of comic story like you've created, you need to realize or understand what the audience knows versus what they don't know. Now, if people are reading this for the first time, they're not going to know any of the context of this story at all. So there are some things that you can just leave as they are, and some things that you kind of need to elaborate on. For example, a thorn tiger, you don't really need to explain that straight away, because it's you're combining something that is like fantasy with something that's real. Like, we know what a tiger is. We don't necessarily know what a thorn tiger is, but you don't have to fill in too many of those gaps because it looks like a tiger. Whereas for what he does with this vial, I have absolutely no idea what that vial is for, what it does, or how he interacts with it either. Because if I show you the following page, this will start to make a little bit of sense. Because we can see from this following page that our hero, who is there, has basically consumed this somehow, we still don't know how, and turned into this puddle here, and now is coming out of this puddle slowly but surely into their moss form. So that's sort of the narrative that's at play here. The problem is that even if we go into here, because when I first read this and I went from this page to this page, I still didn't really quite figure out how the two pages connected, because I still didn't understand what this was, because there was nothing obvious about the fact that our hero had gone from standing opposite a tiger to then coming out of the ground. Like, I didn't even see him go into the ground. So there's a couple of things that we could do. And this is just my analysis of this page. So basically, looking just at this page, forget the subsequent one for now. I kind of looked at these and thought, okay, well, what do I need to keep in terms of giving information to the reader, and what can I either get rid of or move to a different page? So the first thing I thought of was, I don't need that. I don't need to see the tiger landing, because there's no other information in this panel here other than the tiger landing. You could argue that there's this information here, but there's nothing to show me why that should matter or why I should even notice that, because to me, that's just part of the background. Like, I'm not going to notice that any more than I'm going to notice this tree or this bush in the background. So I would consider getting rid of that one. Likewise, I don't think this is needed either, because it does nothing to help me in this moment of the scene. It's good to know that they are, cheering him on from the sidelines, but I already know that they're on the sidelines, so I don't need that reinforced necessarily, unless you've got room for it, which, as you'll see, I don't think you will, because here's my suggestion. A lot of these things we keep the same. So we keep the tiger and our hero standoff, great panel. It sets everything up for what's about to happen, as does this, because that sets up what our character is about to do. Now, I don't know what this character actually does with the vial. I don't know if they drink it. I don't know if they inject it. I don't know if they smash it onto the ground. Whatever it is they do, I'm not sure. I assume they drink it, so that's why I did that in them just drinking a thing. And then I thought I'd add in like a hero shot almost, where you could start to see that, oh, this thing is having an effect on him. Maybe his eyes change color or something, or he loses the pupils or something happens. And then we can start to see him change into this moss sort of thing. And then I re-added in the tiger. The reason that I redrew that rather than just copy it across, because another little note, and this is a bit of a tangent, is so this tiger is like coming at us like this, but you notice that if you just look at the silhouette, it's very contained, whereas this one, it's slightly more out. So I think, like, generally speaking, that reads more as a tiger coming at you. So that's another thing to keep in mind. But again, that was just something I got a little bit distracted by. So we've got tiger coming towards character taking something out of their pocket, character drinking, character starting to change, tiger attacking, and then it misses. And I would even consider adding maybe like his head or something, or just something to draw a bit more attention to this thing on the ground. Because our tiger has effectively jumped over where he was here, and now he's here. And now it's like, what's going on? Because then when we do get to the following page, it kind of carries on that through line a bit more naturally, I suppose. So always think about, when you're planning out your pages, what information you need to give the audience for them to really understand what is actually going on. And I think that on this page in particular, there's not enough information. That's the main thing. On the following page, though, another thing that I would consider is, so information we've covered. Another thing to really consider is impact. And when I'm talking about impact, I'm talking about, so this panel in particular, right? Because this panel here is effectively the climax of everything that's happened so far. So we've established that our character is in danger because the tiger's coming towards him, and that he's transforming. And then this panel here reveals what he's transforming into. But we've only got a really small panel to deal with that. So it just doesn't feel that important that he's, because also bear in mind that me as a reader, I don't know he can do this until just now. Like, that's not normal. I mean, maybe it is normal within the universe you've created, and maybe your audience has more knowledge than me. But if this is the first time people are reading this, then that's a big deal for them, because they're like, wow, what am I reading here? Like, this is quite an interesting story. Whereas because it's quite a small little panel, it doesn't really come across that same way. So I would consider having like the moss form thing, like maybe he's coming out of the ground or whatever. He's like, rah, moss form. And then, because you've got the tiger there, but I didn't notice it at first, admittedly. So I don't know, maybe we can put the tiger there in the foreground. He's got the roses and the thorns coming off him. And it's like, moss form. You see what I mean? Yeah, let me get rid of that as well. Like how much more, just more impactful and bigger that is compared to like this tiny little panel here. They're the two things that really stuck out for me reading this, because I had a hell of a lot of fun reading this book. And actually, let me go back to my monitor here. You already do this. So this is the moss form page, because if we go to the next page, you give that a hell of a lot of space, because it's a big thing happening. He's shooting his moss dagger. So like do that, but for the moss form as well, because that to me, the moss form is more impactful, more important than him shooting a dagger out of his hand, as cool as that is. So information and impact. Make sure that all the information, or the right amount of information, is there so that the audience can follow along with what's happening, and make sure that the right panels get the right amount of attention to them. So think about, again, all the lead up to him turning into the moss form. The final sort of note in that build up needs the biggest amount of impact, I think. But otherwise, like, this is a really, really cool and fun comic. It reminds me actually a lot of like the Saturday morning animes that you'd watch. So I felt weirdly nostalgic reading this. I don't want to give too much away about this comic, because I mean, the imagination that you've got for this is really, really strong. It's really cool. Like, there's some really, really good ideas that you're playing with here. And like all the other comics in this video, the link to the comic is in the description. So I really recommend everyone check this one out. That is George. Now, the next one is by Walker. Now, Walker sent me this via Discord. So this isn't actually online anywhere as far as I'm aware. But the main thing that I want to talk about with this is, again, word balloons to an extent. So this panel in particular, this first panel here, one of the worst things that you can do for word balloons is have one word balloon there and another word balloon there, because you're crossing the streams. That is the worst, one of the worst things that you can do. Because naturally, when you're reading it, if I'm reading "Thank you, you saved me," I'm naturally thinking that this character is saying that, whereas I know that this character is saying it. So not only are you crossing the beams, but this person's speech is crossing through another character. And so it's really going to look like the wrong people are talking at the wrong time, or the wrong people are saying another person's lines, which again is, you really want to avoid that as much as possible. So that'll be the first thing to mention. And how you can get around this, because so you've got, in this panel, you've got 3 dialogue balloons, right? You've got this one, and this one. So what you can do is effectively take this panel here and you can cut it in half. So there's loads of things you can do, obviously. You could completely redraw it so that maybe this character here is on the left side, so then this balloon will point to them first, and then he is on the right side, so then this balloon points to him second, and then this balloon goes back up there, which is a bit cleaner. But you could also do this. So if I just get rid of the top half there, and I've basically redrawn these. So this is another way that you could do it. In fact, there we go. I added in another page into my Clip Studio canvas because I'm going to show you something in a minute. So here's how you could effectively redo this. So it's just so that the word balloons read a little bit clearer. What we can do, so I can't remember what the characters are called. I do apologize. So I'm going to call this guy is going to be called Bird, and this guy is going to be called Emo. Okay, so we've got Bird and Emo. So the first thing I did is I drew this one. This is Emo, and we've got thank you, you saved me dialogue there, but we've also got him looking up, because then that helps us give this idea that he is looking up at this character here. So he is looking up and Emo is looking down. So then we've got Emo's dialogue there. And then for this word balloon, we've basically taken it from this panel and we're going to put it in this panel, and we're going to change the perspective of this panel so that we're looking down on it. And we've got Bird there, and we've got Emo there, and then we've got this pile here, which if you read the comic, you'll know what that is. Hopefully it's coming soon. It's not actually online, but hopefully it'll come out online relatively soon. So we've got Bird there and Emo there. So Bird is then saying, what is this place anyway? There. And then Emo is saying, hell, obviously. So hell, obviously. Okay. Now, there's a couple of reasons for this. One, it'll be easier for you to draw because you only need to draw like teeny tiny little things to represent your two characters. So you're not having to redraw them over and over again. It also gives the page a bit more visual variety because we're showing different camera angles, which is always nice. We're also showing more of the environment, because that's another thing that you show parts of the environments, like when you've got like a big set piece that you think of. So when Bird lands in hell, he lands on a pile of corpses, right? So that's what this is here, pile of corpses. And it's really cool and it's really visceral and really interesting. And then as he moves, we see that it's gated. It's got like a prison gate thing with barbed wire at the top. So that's what that is that I drew there. But I don't know anything else about this place. I don't know how big it is. I don't know what else is in there. I don't have a sense of scale or space or anything like that. So the more you can show us where we are, the more engaged we're going to be in the characters and what they're doing and what they're experiencing. Another reason to do this is because this little thing here with the little tail that I've added in is this character, who I'm pretty sure is called Farron. But this is like a big wolf thing that attacks our main character, and then Emo comes in and gives it a pig, and he eats the pig and goes off. So again, that shows him, because he's going off in this panel, and it shows him going off to eat the pig. So it kind of wraps that up as well. So it's one panel that's achieving a lot of different things. And then I kept this panel exactly the same. I just basically trimmed it. So I cut this bit off just so that it can fit in line with everything else. And then the rest of the page plays out exactly how it was. So you do what the vast majority of comic creators do, which is that you have a character bias to your panels, where the main thing that you want to show are the characters. Where are the characters? Who's talking to who? Etc., etc. And every now and then I would definitely give reminders to the audience of where you are, especially because, and this is one of the big challenges, the same with that challenge that George has, is that when you create a world or an environment that is not normal or not recognizable, you have to do a lot more work for your audience to figure out where you are and what this world actually looks like and what it encompasses. If this exact scene, everything else played out exactly the same, but it played out in a kitchen, you wouldn't have to do half of this stuff because the audience knows what a kitchen looks like. You could indicate like a sink and some saucepans and stuff, whatever's in the kitchen, right? And you won't have to keep reminding people that they're in a kitchen because we know what a kitchen is. Whereas because this is in a completely new location or an imagined version of hell, you have to treat that way more like a character than you normally would. So spend a little bit more time on the environments as well as the characters. And I think that you'll be able to do that quite well and really effectively as well, because you've obviously got a really like visceral and horror style, and it's really interesting. And if you apply that to the characters as well as the environments, then that will just bring it up to that whole new level. So I really recommend doing that. And don't cross the beams when it comes to word balloons. Like, it is worth, the only time it's worth completely redesigning a panel is if that happens, because it breaks the readability of the panel completely. So in one of the rare events, I would say redraw or redo that panel, or at the very least redo the dialogue and rejig it and just change things around if you need to, which you do. But yeah, otherwise, this is a really interesting comic. I really hope that you put it online as well, though, because nobody else is going to be able to read this just yet. And also thank you for translating it for me, because this comic is not in English. It's really weird. This is a really weird comic. I kind of like it. I really dig it. But yeah, it's really weird. But hopefully it's out. Hopefully it's online soon. All right, the third comic we got is by Doozy. And this is a short comic. So it's like an all-encompassing story. So first things first, like that's a really cool, really great pose, great expressions. And one of the things that I think is your strength is your ability to express or have your characters express their emotions. So that's really, really strong. So straight off the bat, we can see from this panel here that we are in some big warehouse. And because of the placement of this and this word balloon tail, which could be a little bit longer, we can see that this is Maya. And because this continues here and this is pointing to her, we can defer that this person is this person. So that all so far so good, right? We're establishing immediately what's going on. So we're straight in there. So really, really good start. See what I mean? Great expressions. Now, the main thing that concerned me about this is the pacing to a degree. So there are some panels in there where I kind of think, okay, what purpose is this panel serving? Like, why is this panel here? And sometimes when you add panels in arbitrarily, they can actually make things a lot more confusing than they need to be. So for example, let's take this panel, this page here. So we've got this character saying, why do we need her again? This character replies saying, you guys really need to focus on the meetings. She's bait, her bro's been messing with us. Now, I don't know if that's this character talking. I know this character is reaching for something. So I assume that this hand belongs to this character and this dialogue is a continuation of this character's dialogue. Right? Now we've got somebody else saying, do we really need all this for one guy? Now I'm kind of confused because now I don't know who's talking. Are we back to the first guy? I'm not sure. But maybe I can assume. Now there's nothing, because I can't see his wrist in this one. I don't know for sure if that wrist belongs to him. Do you see what I mean? And then we've got a reply. Is he replying to him? I'm not sure. And then we cut to these two guys here. Why? And again, I'm not entirely sure who's winning. And then we go back to the hands again. And then we've got an outside shot where we've got more people talking. And again, I don't know who's talking. And then we go to this final shot and we've got a brand new character. And it turns out that these hands belong to him. So we've got three characters talking and I don't really know when each character is talking. It's quite confusing. And then we get to the end of this conversation where the bad guys are playing dominoes and talking and stuff. And then we've got our hero landing. And it literally goes from that to that immediately. Now, my assumption here, and it's never really a good thing when your audience has to assume things, is that this guy has dropped out of nowhere and has landed in this seat in this cool pose, right? And that's sort of like his hero entrance. And then we've got the action scene that happens later. But before we get there, I do want to really address this because I think that there are a couple of changes that you can make that will really make this so much clearer than it currently is in terms of the dialogue in particular. So if we go back over to Clip Studio Paint. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the old page. Bloop. pop you in there so we can see it side by side. Now, basically, I'm going to do the same thing where I map everything across. So the first three is fine because I'm assuming that, well, we know that this person's talking first, then this person's talking second. So let me just do like one. In fact, I'll call him A and call him B. Now I assume it goes back to A because I assume this guy is talking, right? You're going to have to help me out on this part. I did sort of go back and forth, but if I say anything, it will be a guess because I still don't really understand who's talking other than maybe this guy is C. This guy is C. So we've got C and then maybe B and C or maybe A again. Do you see what I mean? I'm kind of guessing. And then A, B, C. I don't know. You're going to have to help me out with that one. I couldn't figure out who was talking to who. But what I can do is get you to go from this scene to this bit here, basically to tidy up this scene and lead us into the introduction of our hero. And we do that by, as they continue to talk, so these are dialogue boxes, balloons, obviously, we can show up in the rafters here, that's what that is, we can see our hero. And we can just see them in silhouette. We don't have to reveal anything, we just know that they are there. And then we've got the dominoes carrying on. And we don't need this exterior shot, I don't think, because again, that just confuses things even more. If we show who's talking, again, I'm kind of guessing that it's this guy talking. Maybe it's because he's won. I'm pretty sure he's won. So I thought he'd be like, yeah, I've won. And then we go from that to showing our hero is dropping down. So then by the time he's halfway through that sentence, it makes more sense that our hero has then, boom, appeared. Because we can see that they've gone from the rafters and they've dropped down and they've landed in that cool pose, ready to beat the bad guys. So again, it's about, sometimes one of the things that can really help is figuring out where your scene climaxes or where the scene pivots and then working backwards from there. And being like, okay, I know that my hero is going to land in the seat in this cool pose. What little breadcrumbs can I leave for the audience up until that moment? And that way it just doesn't come out of nowhere. Because again, when I was reading this for the first time and I looked at that, I was like, okay, who's this guy? Like, it looks like is he the same? Is he on their team? Is he a hero? Who is this? He just appears out of nowhere. And I had no context for him whatsoever. So if you build up to that and show that he's a guy who's looking up, I mean, that's just my suggestion. You don't have to do that, obviously. But just give some indication of who he is and, you know, all that good stuff. Now, I do want to move on to the action scene. Because again, I mean, I love that face. That's really, really cool. And again, like, I think action is not something that I really would have any concern with, because I think that's great. And yeah, it's really, really cool. However, and I only actually intended to do one page of yours, but I ended up doing multiple ones because I started having a lot of fun with it. And it was this part, really. So we've got our character Jax. He's basically beating up all the bad guys. That's a really cool panel. It shows that he's, you know, slicing them all up. It's really cool, really frenetic and great. And then we see him presumably looking at Maya looking back and being like, yeah, kick some ass. That's great. And then we've got the characters running away from him. And then, I mean, that's a really nice touch, the fact that his mask shows his expressions, because it shows that he's looking up and he's noticed something, and then something has impacted. Now, I assume here he's backflipping away from that rather than being like flung back from it. And then he steadies himself, and then we've got the introduction of another character. And then we've got the next fight scene, which doesn't last very long because Jax is basically going to ruin this guy. Now, one of the other things that I found quite challenging reading this, I don't know if you'll be able to see the same thing as me, but so this is on Manga Plus, right? I don't know if this is just the way Manga Plus does things, but I couldn't tell where the page breaks were. So I'm assuming that this is not a page break. This is just like a full panel. But then is that a page break? Because we've got a line there. So is that page 1? And then that's page 2? And then this is the start of page 3? And then this is the start of page 4? I know it numbers them there, but that didn't help me at all. And then this is number 5, I think, and then number 6, and then this is number 7, maybe. But then that says 8. You see what I mean? So that was quite puzzling. And the only reason I bring that up is because I've made some suggestions and I've kind of guessed where the page breaks are. So when it comes to this scene or this part of the scene where a character looks up, something crashes down, then we've got the introduction of a new character. I think that, particularly considering that this is just a short comic where you kind of need to maximize the impact of each panel because you don't have that many to play with, I would suggest that this, having 3 panels here of the same character, where you basically got 2 dialogue boxes, balloons, isn't making the best use of the amount of space that you have, or the limited amount of space that you have. So here would be my suggestion. Basically, what I'm suggesting is you take these 2 and just get rid of them, and you put the first bit of dialogue next to this panel here. I'll show you what I mean. Beep. So we've got the character looking cool and stoic. He notices something, and then we have the big boom thing. Again, I would sort of add some sound effects to the original thing to show that, you know, there's a big impact, and then he's flipping away, and then he's steadying himself. Then out of the shadows, we've got the pig man. And I would also put our character in the foreground as well to show that he is standing off with the new character. And then he's got the first bit of dialogue. So that's sort of my first suggestion for just the introduction of this new character, where he says, "I got to say, I'm impressed. You're strong, Jax." All right. Another thing here in particular, like this is quite a bad tangent. So a tangent, generally speaking, is when 2 lines are interfering with each other and they kind of break the shape, or they cause a unwanted, like, optical illusion almost. So when I first saw this, I thought that was the top of his head. See that there? But that is just the smoke from this panel here. So that, like, if you had the smoke sort of starting from there instead, you wouldn't get that. But because it's starting there, it looks like it's the top of his head. Super easy to do. Everybody does it all the time. I do it as well. It's one of those things that you don't notice it until after you look back on it, after you've actually drawn it. So but it's something that you should definitely keep an eye on. Like, if you see 2 lines that are getting quite close to each other, try and give some space between them, because otherwise the readability kind of merges those 2 lines into one just continuous shape, and it can make it look and read a bit weird. So anyway, let's get onto the fight. So we've got a fight between Pigman and Jax. Now, Pigman goes to punch Jax. Jax puts 1 sword away, and I didn't realize that that's what he was doing at first, because he only needs 1 sword because he's a badass. But I didn't realize that at first. I was sort of like, why is he going for a sword again? I'm not putting any comment on that beyond the fact that I didn't notice it, because I'm not saying that that's wrong or anything like that, but it kind of goes to show that different readers are going to interpret your drawings in different ways. So I missed that. Other people wouldn't. I realize it now because I've read it a couple of times. I realize that he's putting the sword back into its sheath. Anyway, then he slices through Pigman, which again, I didn't fully understand at first, but I could kind of infer based on what was going on that that's what happened. And then I love this panel. That's super cool. That's such a great pose for Jax. And then we got Pigman, who has been, you know, killed. So here is my suggestion for this, because the thing with it, the only thing I have with this, again, is it comes back to pacing, is we've got this big boss character coming down. He's had a big grand entrance. He's come through the smoke. He looks badass, great design, and it's over like that. Like, there's virtually no tension there. Like, Jax just rips him in half with his sword, or slices through his head, whatever he does, right? And so I would like to see a little bit more of this and this play out just a little bit more. You don't have to add in tons of stuff because this is obviously still a short. But here's my suggestion for this scene. So we've got Pigman going to punch him, and this is the second part of his dialogue. So this part here, he is saying, sorry, but your run ends here, okay? So that's what that piece of dialogue is. And then I thought it'll be quite a cool shot to have them both sort of charging towards each other with Maya in the middle. I thought that would be quite a cool visual. And then I put like a anime slice sort of effect there to show that, you know, something's happened. And then we've got the reaction from Pigman and he's, had his throat cut. And I love that pose, so I just stole it. And in anime, when like something gets sliced and it sort of stays still for a while and then it falls, I thought that would be quite a cool thing where he sort of is stood up and then falls down. And it'll be quite a nice homage to the kind of manga style that you're influenced by. But again, like this isn't to say that my version is correct or anything like that. It's just to say that when it comes to showing the audience what's happening, you want to think about, we go back to that word impact, like how much impact do you want each scene to have? Because the original, although it is impactful because it gives me the impression that Jax is a badass, which is the purpose, is the point, right? So you've achieved everything that you set out to achieve in this comic, I think, and I had a lot of fun with it. But it's just that it's not just about Jax. It's about you need to have the bad guys have impact as well. Because if the bad guys have no impact, they might as well not be there, because there's no resistance, there's no stakes, there's no tension. Because if Jax could just rip through everybody, then what's the point in designing this guy? Because he might as well be henchman number 3 rather than the big boss. And although in my suggestion, it also ended very, very quickly, which I guess is the intent, that it felt a bit more like a boss fight, I think. Slightly more. But, feel free to disagree with that. And then we get to the end and everyone lives happily ever after. Like, it's a really cool comic. It's nice and simple. It's just a one-shot thing. I really recommend people give it time and properly read it because it's a lot of fun. And there's some really good ideas here as well. But yeah, I think it's about just making sure that your audience knows what you need them to know. And if there are any points where you've put the word balloons in or you've put different panels in that are going to confuse the message or confuse the story, then all of the hard work you put into it can be completely undone. So it's really worth you just double checking that it makes sense and the audience knows who's talking and when, because that matters. So make sure that you nail that, because like the action and the story and the characters, I think they're all good. I don't think you really need to worry that much about with that. What? I can talk. It's just about doing that more so you get better at it over time. I think to summarize all 3 of these comics, it's about information and impact. They're the 2 things that I would really focus on for this. When it comes to information, obviously make sure that the audience knows what's going on and that the audience has the right amount of information they need to process the story, whether that is processing the world that you've created and the rules of the world that you've created, or processing who is talking to who and when. Like both of those things are very, very important. It doesn't mean that you have to spoon feed it to them or you need to just dump a load of information on them, but just make sure that as each panel goes along and as each scene plays out, that you're giving the correct amount of information as the scene plays out and as the narrative moves forwards. And when it comes to impact, make sure that the things that matter are focused on more than anything else. So again, when you think of George, the thing that matters is the character turning into the moss form. When you think of Walker, I think the thing that matters is the environment in which they are in, because he's been dropped into hell. Like that's the premise of the story. And I don't want to spoil too much about that, but I want to see more about the environment because you give me a lot of character, which is great, but not enough environment. And when it comes to Doozy, I think it really is about like just a bit better direction in terms of, when I say direction, I mean as if you're a director of a film set. So I need to know who is talking and when. And likewise with the pig character, I need to feel that he is this big boss character first before he then gets defeated, because otherwise he might as well just be everyone else. But yeah, as you can see, there's 3 really good comics. I really recommend you reading 2 of the 3. I can't recommend Walker's yet because it's not online just yet, but hopefully it will be. And you can give that a read as well. And if you want your comic to be featured, then join the Discord. And I try to get through these as quickly as possible. I'm sorry it has been a little while waiting. That's partly because of the Christmas period and partly because of time. But I will get through everyone as quickly as I possibly can. And yeah, have fun making your comics. I'll see you later.